I apologize. YouTube has changed some things, so it takes a little bit longer to go live now. We are live.
Thank you.
Okay, let's try it again. We call the meeting to order. Teresa, will you please?
Ms. Wyckoff? Here. Dr. Wilson? Ms. Weiss? Ms. Steph? Mr. Shonda
Here.
Dr. Pandolfi? Here. Ms. Lemunion? Here. Mr. Lazio?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Cook?
Here.
Ms. Virgo? Here. Mr. Feast?
Here. Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
For anybody else who wish, you can rise for a consent invocation.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic
for which it stands,
one
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
I invite you to pray with me if you so choose. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this truly beautiful day that you've given us. We thank you that you are a God who hears and answers prayer. We thank you that you have made every human being in your own image. I thank you for these faithful and committed people who are gathered in this room this evening. Staff members, board members, concerned citizens. My request tonight is for wisdom and for unity in these purposes at hand. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so are your ways higher than our ways. There's so much we cannot see in our limited vision. Therefore, we ask you to open our eyes to your reality so we may understand what is truly important. Help us to make wise decisions that will be of most benefit to our community. Everything seems to be changing so quickly. Only you know the future. So we humbly ask for wisdom and discernment so that we can faithfully serve this amazing community that you have entrusted to us. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. So, first matter is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion for that? Second?
A second.
I can't hear who said. Thank you.
Great. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next matter is consent agenda that includes the expenses and the approval of the previous minutes. So there's been a motion for that.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
any discussion on this? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstaining. Okay, great. Next matter is visitors' comments, and we are very pleased to have the mayor of Riverside joining us. So if you'd please start us off.
Yay.
First of all, I apologize for being a few minutes late, but I can't traffic. What can I say? And you guys deal with it as well. So I'm very excited to be here tonight. First of all, thank you, distinguished board members, for giving me this opportunity, because I wanted to come back after we had met on December 13th, I think was the meeting that we were at, and kind of give you an update on conversations and meetings since I was present at that meeting. Unfortunately, I had to leave a little bit early from that last meeting and learned that afterwards that you had voted to move forward with East Independence. And I was really excited about that for Mayor Rowland, and that there was still a strong commitment to the City of Riverside's project. So after that meeting, I just wanted to let you all know I received a call from board member, Mr. Cook, and we had a great discussion, and he was kind of informed me of the challenges with the internal budget figures, and we discussed in detail that we, meaning the City of Riverside, had been patient but prudent. and that we had already done a land transaction, as well as the city making a financial commitment to the project. I also discussed with him that the new location where the old Quick Trip was located and had been taken down was a great location to inspire learning, nestled between the city's Welcome Plaza and one of our parks. So it's just really a great little spot right there. I also told him that I had seen the initial concept and was excited about providing this beautiful amenity to not only our citizens, but the surrounding region as well. In our opinion, the library is a place that brings an equitable experience to everyone, no matter what the demographic. And we have a really diverse community right now. Further in our discussion, Mr. Cook and he asked me if I would be willing to give him 60 days to review the capital and operational budgets and determine a path forward. I absolutely agreed to that as we were approaching the holidays. It was a busy time. And unfortunately, I experienced a death in my family and my focus has been elsewhere. On January 5th, 2023, we communicated by letter to all of you, providing detail on Riverside, on assessed valuation, population growth, business growth, and tax base that we have created for all taxing jurisdictions through the development in horizons that you will get the benefits of by the end of this decade. And it is an exciting time. So here we are, mid-January. And I have a visit with Jake and Jim to review the exterior building concepts, the interior layout for meeting collaboration spaces, and color palettes. The abundance of natural light was bright and inviting, and it truly welcomed everyone. Additionally, we followed up with this visit with a letter of thanks for allowing us to give input and feedback from going from a 15,000 square foot facility to a 12,500 square foot facility through a newer design and space efficiencies. This smaller physical footprint allows a right sizing for our community for now and in the future. And I brought to you all a map. Does someone want to hand that to you all? Thank you. I tell you what, I've got a wonderful staff and I really appreciate them very, very much, as well as you do, I'm sure. Let him hand this map out to you. And I want to just tell you the impacts on the facility in Riverside. This map is a diagram of census tracts for the 2020 census tract population. And you look at everything in blue, and that represents 45,000 people in those census tracts. If you go to the left side, which is the west side, that line, that census tract line, is about halfway between Riverside and Parkville, because Parkville has a branch, and I'm sure that people go to the Parkville branch. So, but that's about halfway. And then it goes up to Platte Woods to the top of that census line. And I can tell you, I should have just grabbed Platte Woods as well, because I know that many of them come to my facility. Right. But we did the line. So that line is 72nd Street, and then it stair steps down to 68th Street over into Clay County, stair steps down to Inglewood, and stair steps down again to Vivian. So you can see that we have a big area that is growing, and it will continue to grow in this space. I put together that what is happening in our communities, and especially in this area, and I can specifically speak for Riverside, every older home that we have that has been occupied, like people like my parents and all their friends and all that have left them, that are gone, that are either moving to nursing homes or they're passing, these homes are being backfilled with young families with small children. And I'm just going to tell you, that right there is a bunch of older families. And these are big subdivisions that are established. You've got Misty Woods, Ridgewood Estates, Sunpoint, Hills of Walden, Tremont, Clam Hills. Green Hills, Stratford Estates. That's just in plat. And then the clay ones is Crestview, Old Briar Cliff, and Green Meadows that would all come over my way. And that doesn't even count the multiple apartment units that are spread out through this area, which are many. So I'm just here to tell you that I am very, very pleased on being able to bring this information to you so that you can put all this information together and figure out how we move forward with a project that fits the density that I have shown you. And because I'll tell you what, the worst thing that would happen is that we build something and 5 years we say, what the heck were we thinking about? This just not make any sense. So I'll leave that to you. I certainly am open for questions if you have any. All right. Thank you guys.
I do have a question.
Sure.
What's your plan for the population? Because I did work with the county. You would Riverside itself ran 3,000. It's now a little over 4,000. Are you planning what I'll call multi-floor, higher density units?
Yes,
at some
we have
point?
several. I can just tell you, I am 65 years old. And in my lifetime, if I see the city of Riverside, it will probably be around 7,500 population. That's probably my biggest with the density that we will be doing. It could be more. I don't think we'll ever be over 10,000, but that because we're just 6 square miles. But we have destinations that people come to us for. The Red X. I mean, I can go on. The new Red X is going to open the end of in February, and they come all over for it.
That's
I mean,
right.
and the Corner Cafe. I can go on with people that come to Riverside and then while they're there, they just may say, "Hey, I'm coming here today. I'll just shoot in here to the library for whatever I need." So, but yes, but that's in realistic terms. That's probably what my population is going to be.
I'd like to make a comment. I believe it was your mother that passed away.
It was.
So I just want to tell you that I've been praying for you personally. And our condolences on the passing of your dear mom.
Thank you. And just anecdotal, if many of you may know, some may know, my mother was the mayor prior to me.
Yep. Yep.
And believe me, I had to run elections and win. It was nothing handed to me, but it's 16 years. And my mother was an avid library participant. In her spare time, which was not a lot, she was a big reader and she did enjoy going to the library. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. Thank you for those kind words.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Now we go to the visitors' comments. Is Mr. back in here? Okay, then we have Mr. Furman.
Thank you. Mr. Mason, welcome.
Thank you.
Mid-Continent Public Library. Mr. President, I'm coming to you tonight to express my concerns for a process that I saw start at the last Finance and Audit Committee meeting. You'll be hearing a recommendation from that committee to go outside the usual process for bidding a contract, and I'm very concerned about this recommendation. As you know, this board asked last September that an expert be engaged for a Prop L plan review. The staff prepared an RFP as they were instructed, and this was submitted to the chair of the Finance Committee in December. Based on Mr. Cook's comments in the Finance Committee, he tabled it because he did not feel it was clear enough for him. So rather than follow the established public process, Mr. Cook took a different route. He invited a representative from CFO Systems to make a presentation to the Finance Committee about assisting in writing the RFP. This apparently took place after previous conversations he had with one of the company founders, Brett Feverett, up in Omaha over the last several months. After the presentation by this single company, Mr. Cook suggested the board could hire someone without an RFP process, that he doesn't know of any company having the necessary experience other than CFO Systems, and that once the RFP was presented, that CFO Systems would, quote, obviously be one of the respondents, unquote. If I were to sum up what I heard Mr. Cook say during the finance meeting, it was this. been talking to my buddy in Omaha, and I asked his company to present today. I can't imagine anyone else who could do the job. I'd like to have them come in, write their own job description. He would call it an engagement letter. So write the job description for the initial project, write the proposal as part of that project, and then bid on the proposal they just wrote. Folks, this is what cronyism looks like. This is what corruption smells like. I'd like to take a moment to speak specifically to the trustees appointed from Clay County, my county. You know, we just changed our county charter and voted in 4 additional county commissioners because we were tired of this sort of behavior. Please don't go back down that road. I'm asking this board to reject the motion coming from the Finance and Audit Committee as presented as item 6.11, and that you move forward with a public, transparent RFP process for the Prop L plan review after a full discussion by all of the trustees. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Words of recognition.
You realize that was. Excuse me.
The first one is we're welcoming Aaron Mason to his very first board meeting. Welcome. He's had a very full day already, so we are happy. I'm happy he is here.
Follow up on what Susan had mentioned. We're absolutely delighted and enthusiastic and very, very happy that you are with us, and thank you and your family for moving here. And at the open meeting session in which Aaron was very happily and unanimously selected to have an offer extended to, we had, through Zoom contact, we had the people who served with us in the selection committee. And the question was asked very directly, who is this person? And they basically said, at this time, at this place, he is the person within the search. The search was extensive, literally across the country. And I think right now they're going from a transition from building buildings and constructing erection plans. With Aaron's background, that was just utterly fantastic. And not the buildings, but what you do inside them. I think it's going to be a great, great time for us, and welcome aboard. Happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I can't say enough about the staff in Mid-Continent. They've been very warm and welcoming to me, and it's been a wonderful first day. And I look forward to getting down to work and building on past success. So thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. And then we also have Mid-Continent Public Library expresses gratitude to former board member John Laney for his dedicated service for the library for the years 2003 to 2022. And this is the award we'll be giving him.
Yeah. It's the standard book that we give everybody. He's in Florida. Yeah, he wasn't able to attend tonight. For those of you who've been on the board for a while, it goes in January. And I'll just read what it says. Mr. John W. Laney, MCPL Board of Trustees, 2003 to 2022. You have made the library a better place. Trustees, staff, and customers of Clay, Jackson, and Black counties. And we will make sure that he gets this.
Great. Thank you. We'll be watching us in about 3 hours on YouTube. So. Okay, thank you, Susan. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, financial reports.
Okay. At the end of December, we have received a little over $20 million in tax revenue. That number is about $600,000 lower than last year. At this point, it's too early to tell the final result of the tax revenue, but I believe will be close to the budget. The total amount of operating revenue is close to $21 million. Last year's number, 14.5, includes a transfer to debt service fund. Current year's transfer was made in January 2023. Next page is the operating expenditures. The payroll and benefits, $16.4 million, 48.3% of the budget. Library materials is $6.17 million, close to 54% of the budget. That number includes all the database we paid in the beginning of the fiscal year, for the whole year. So the next 6 months, the number will be below 50% of the budget. Other operational accounts is about $4.4 million, close to 42% of the budget. Again, we are at middle point of the fiscal year. It's too early to tell the final result. I kind of believe we might be a little bit below the budgetary number for expenditures. Also, we have a new library director now, so I can report the cost and library directors. Total amount we spent is $115,780. We paid two companies, $47,557 to Waddick and Patterson, and $68,223 to Coleman Drew. Next page will be debt service fund. There's no change to that report, and we only made one interest payment, $1.4 million. The next payment, about $5 million, will be in February 2023. Next page is the capital project fund. I have changed the format of my presentation. Instead of reporting the total amount of the capital plan expenditure, I have a list of projects budgeted for current year. The top portion is the other capital expenditures. We have two projects, Green Rocket and the Study Center. For Green Rocket, we haven't spent anything. We paid half last year, and we have about $150,000 left to finish it. The next one, Story Center, the budget is a little over $50,000, and we only spent $165 so far. The rest of the expenditures is for capital improvement plan. There's a list of the capital projects we're working on. The bottom four in blue color are the unfinished capital projects. And on the YTD, the year-to-date number, to show the amount paid for those four projects. Besides those four unfinished projects, we also have a little bit expenditure left, Smithfield, Twin Hills, and furnitures, and maybe a little bit for Lee Summit. Total amount we spent is about $7.28 million. Next page is the health insurance fund. The total amount of contribution from both employer and employees is about $1.88 million. That's about half of the budget. And the administration fee and the reinsurance is about $600,701. I believe we will exceed that budgetary number of $1 million for the whole fiscal year. The budget was based on the projection we made in September 2021. But the medical claims could be below the budgetary number. So I think at the end of the fiscal year, the total amount of expenditures it will be below the budget. The cash on hand is $1.6 million. Fund reserve balance, $1.3 million. That number is right in the middle of the minimum fund balance required and the maximum fund balance allowed. Next page is the quarterly investment summary. For capital investment account, the current market value is about $23.7 million. Cost basis, 5.8. We also received the interest income from July to December, for $132,737. For operating account investment, market value is 8.37. The cost basis is a little below that number, 8.32. We received the interest income, $88,595. And also we paid the fees to Central Trust between July and December, $14,654. That number, that fee is based on the new revised proposal from the bank. Also, they gave us some discount for the month of July. So, that's my report for the month. On your board pack, you can see a list of all the payments we made in December and a detailed investment statement should be posted to board doc for you to read. That's my report for the month.
Thank you, Quan. Any questions?
Well, I just have one question. On the very first slide, I don't know if we could go back to that. You had mentioned the budget, like that there was one more, I think. Oh, maybe.
Next one.
Next.
Okay.
Keep going, one more.
Next, the capital.
Maybe it was this one. Yes, this one. Sorry. Thank you, Cody. So you had mentioned the budget for we had, so that was as of 6/30 of 2022. Then you had mentioned just like in passing the budget. So year to date, like, do we have out, like, are we, like, when you look at this right now and you look at the budget for the year for 2023, are we on target?
Okay.
Maybe I was just thinking maybe we could have another column that would say like the budget.
Yeah. First column is how much we spend on those projects from 2027 all the way to June 30, 2022.
Okay.
The second column is how much we spent from July 1st, 2022, December 31st, 2022.
Okay.
What's missing is the current year's budget. The issue I have is we did not budget at project level for the current year. I can add a total budget for the whole capital improvement plan for the current fiscal year. But we do have a budget for Reading Rocket in the storage center.
Okay.
I can make that change for next month.
Okay, because you just happened to mention like 50,000. I just was wondering how that fell. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Business or unfinished business committee reports. Brent, do you want to read off?
Sure. I'm Brent Schoenemeyer. I'm chair of the building committee. We spent a lot of time in December on lots of projects, so this should go a lot quicker. Jake is going to provide a construction update on projects that we have, and then after he's done, I'm going to give a little update on Riverside.
Okay, next slide, please. All right, we're looking at North Oak. It's coming along really nicely. We've had a few delays here and there, but nothing significant on getting the building completely sealed off so that they can work more inside. But you can see they're going pretty heavily on the HVAC. If you look at the lower left, you can see the most of it is installed. The big thing on the front that I'm looking forward to is on that picture on the upper left, you can see the front of the building, but we don't have the glass installed yet. That whole area there to the left there that looks like it's open and looks like it's not complete is going to all be glass. And it's going to be a really neat addition as we go forward. That's going to be about 3 to 4 weeks before we get that completely installed. That's why it has to be installed. But we're real close to sealing it up and continue to move forward and get the rest of the interior full. So the next slide is Grain Valley. Grain Valley starting to take shape. We got structural steel on site. We've got the hybrid wood joists that we're looking to put into place, and probably by the end of this month, it's going to look like an actual building. Now, there's not going to be any exterior, any sheath or anything like that. But the site won't just look like paved over slab of concrete. It's really moving forward, making really good progress. We don't have any pictures of East Independence. We are in the permitting process. We are moving forward on it, but that usually takes a couple months before you see anything moving up ground. And with that, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Brett.
We're nearing the end of lots of projects. The mayor of Riverside actually gave part of her case for what it is, our partnership or financial partnership with them in that project. It's important for the board to know is that the construction drawings are being finalized as they go out to bid next Tuesday. There'll be a building committee meeting in February. And there should be an expectation on the board that this will come back as a matter to be voted on and considered at the March meeting. So I just wanted to, let you know, this is an important project. It's an important project because it's the end of our construction capital program. And it's an important project because we have a financial relationship with a party that's helping us build it. So we have to go forward in good faith, how it is that we do that. And I realize that there are attendant issues around that, but we should be addressing those issues prior to March to the degree that we can, so we don't walk in and sort of say, well, golly gee, we have these unanswered questions and we have to wait till we get these questions answered because these are guaranteed maximum prices and they're time sensitive. And we can't sort of say, please, pretty please, can you extend it from 45 days to 90 days? Because that's just not how the construction industry is at the moment. I would strongly encourage anybody, if they have questions, please ask them of staff, or feel free to get them to me. If you want a tour of the site, I'm happy to meet you at the Corner Cafe and walk across the street and, go walk around the lot. It's important that we just make a really informed decision for a variety of different reasons. And that's what I would have to say about Riverside. The mayor wrote a really strong letter about our community. When these mayors write about their community, you see the passion that they have for their community and frankly, the understanding that they have about their community, because it's a level of detail that in some senses is not necessarily readily available to us. And they're talking about their corporate limits. And I think Mayor Rose made an important point. Our libraries aren't hermetically sealed. You don't have to show a different library card when you cross a city-state, a municipal line or a city line. Susan might answer this question. How many different cities do we have in the Mid-Continent Public Library?
We have 66 different political divisions, so pretty close.
And how many
Includes
different
the counties too. So
and how many different school districts?
21.
21. So in some senses, we are serving communities and catchment areas and population areas. And so that's my report, unless anybody has any questions, either Jake or myself.
Questions, comments?
Thank you.
Okay, right. Finance Committee.
Okay, Finance met last Thursday. We go through some routine things just to let you know. We talk about the financials. The disbursement schedule that's on board docs is available. That's something Quan has put together. I've asked him to see if he can expand that so we have a little more information as to the type of disbursement, or at least the nature of the vendor, whether it's the software, books, whatever the case may be, so that schedule will evolve here since we've only had a few months. The other schedule you have is one for personnel, which Jennifer has taken charge of preparing and managing. It is very detailed and it's very helpful in understanding where the resources are being utilized and how we're managing that against budget. So I don't intend to walk through that in detail. As Quan said, we're about 48% of the current year's budget year to date. You see it there. And obviously the costs are higher than last year because of the new branches that have, or the branches that have reopened. So unless you have questions for Jennifer, I'm not going to go into further detail. Okay, the next schedule you have, or that's up there, I guess we didn't print this off. I'm going to pass out there. Cody, can you blow that up? There are two things I'm handing. Take one and pass them on. Same here, should be enough for each of you. As part of this process, because of the, I guess I'll call it moving parts, and I'll get to the budgeted Prop L matters here in a minute, but we had talked about having to fund these construction projects and getting our arms around where we stood on cash flow. So Quan put a more detailed schedule together, looking out not just the current year, but two years beyond. These, what you're seeing there is the components that were discussed at the September levy meeting. That was part of the September levy calculations. It is broken up for each of the fiscal years into the, I guess I'll call it the three critical cash components as to revenue. So the July to November is typically when we get very few revenues coming in. December to February is where the vast majority of the revenues come in from the counties. And then March to June is just the residual, whether it's late collections or otherwise coming in. That is the case for all 3 years. Again, those numbers pretty closely sync up to what the levy is and what was in the levy calculation. The disbursements, it's the same thing. He's broken down the operating expenses, payroll, materials, and then what I'll call it just the basic operating expenses, again, into the 3 different buckets for each fiscal year. So you'll see, again, same format, same thing. This syncs up to what we discussed in September. The debt payments are per the debt schedule. The interest is paid in July. The principal is paid in February.
Yes.
Correct. So you'll see you'll see the net impact of those from period to period. And then you'll see a line called increase in due from the capital fund. We'll get down to that in a minute here. And then the last line you have on the schedule is called decrease in accounts payable. At the end of the fiscal year for the report, for the audit reporting, there are some accruals that are made. Those are obviously reversed and paid in either July or August. I'll call it the first calendar quarter of the fiscal year. The rest of the year is then pretty much on a cash basis. And then again, in June, you'll see the accrual. So the numbers just flip at the end of June going into July. The critical line you'll see there is the ending operating cash. And that is the combined total of both the general fund cash and the impact of the cash flow to fund the building projects as they're presented in the detail that's below there. Okay. I'll point you to the July to November, actually the November 30 projected balance for the 23 calendar, the 24 fiscal year of $14.1 million cash deficit. And then the next calendar year, you'll see the $16.1 million deficit. Those are real numbers, okay? And I'll get to the reasons that's occurring here in a minute. The ending operating fund balance, again, this is a book balance cash, but you'll see that what goes down where we thought we were having somewhere in the high 30s, 30 in excess of 30 million with some of the changes that have happened on the capital fund. We end up with a little over 12 million in each of those November periods. November is the critical date because that is when we burn up we burn through our cash reserves before we collect the next year's tax revenues. Okay, Cody, can you scroll down slowly? Go ahead, keep going. I don't know if that capital fund will fit. Okay, stop right there. Okay, what you have there then is the capital fund showing for the same periods of each of the fiscal years presented, the beginning cash, the investment maturities. Again, we talked about this in previous months where the capital fund bonds were purchased with durations out over a 5 to 6+ year period. Those are bullet bonds. They're obviously not going to be called because the coupon rates on them are either 1% or below. It is not uncommon for agencies to be called in short order. This market would be, the current market would be typical, but with the coupon rates we have, those bonds are not going to be called. So you'll see then the next line, we have the net Riverside proceeds. If you recall in the budget process, we talked $1,350,000 coming from Riverside. I believe that $1,356,000 has some closing costs or whatever out of it. So that is an actual cash in the door at this point. And then the projected interest income is really just a 1% factor on the cash you see up above. The disbursements below the first column, those are the actual disbursements through November. The second column is the projected for the December through January. And again, same thing for the third, which would be March through June. Again, and then for the next three columns, repeating that for the 23-24 fiscal period. Scroll down, Cody, if you can scroll down some more. Keep going. Keep going. You can bring it, go ahead and keep going just so I can get that up above in the middle of the page, if you will. Oops. I guess that's okay. All right. So let's leave it there. All right. So at the bottom, you will see obviously see the total cash disbursements there for each of those periods, and then the net capital of the fund. Again, some mechanics there, and the capital fund ending cash. Okay. Below that is the bonds, and you'll notice that we have the opening market value adjustment, the interest, and the ending bonds, and you don't see those roll off for the next 2 years much at all because most of the maturities are stuck out into the 25, 6, and 7 years. So again, we have a liquidity issue with those. As Quan just pointed out or showed on the previous his report, there's a little over $2 million of market value adjustment between the part of what's cost and what I'll call the liquidation or the market value at this point. So if we sold all the maturities, we take a $2 million loss. Okay, so that Cody, go ahead and scroll back up to the top again. The one thing I want to point out on this is that in the go back down for a second. I need to, if you will. Okay, in that section there, the projected disbursements, the current fiscal year, the 22-23 total is 17.2 million, and the 23-24 total is 13.5 million. So in the aggregate, that's 30.7 million. These are cash numbers. There's no non-cash transactions in here. I went back to the June 20th memo that was presented to the board for that meeting. The numbers, that just the raw numbers in that memo for the 23 fiscal year were 20.2 million, and for the 24 fiscal year was 6.3 million, for a total of 26.5 million. So just looking at the raw numbers, I have 30.7 in this current projected schedule, and 6 months ago we had 26.5 million. I had a $4.2 million adjustment. However, in that June schedule are two non-cash transactions. One is Riverside for 650, and the other one is the East Independence land swap that at the time, the number that was used was $1 million. So if I take those out, then I get to 24.8 million. So when I compare the 24.8 to the 30.7, I have a gap there in just 6 months. I have $5.9 million of additional capital spending that we didn't know about. That's a pretty significant number. And that's what's creating the Cody. Now you can scroll back up. So that's a component of that cash deficit you'll see at November of 14+ million. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next section and we can come back to this. Okay. Cody, can you bring up that Excel file under 6 point, whatever it is, 6.10?
Yes, just one moment, Gordon.
Okay. You have two schedules here I handed out. One is the summary of expenditures and the other one is the summary of funding. I'm going to walk through a little bit of the worksheet detail just to show you where this came from. You're welcome to go into and look at the detail as you wish. But the summary, I think, will probably provide the bigger picture view that you're, likely more interested in. The worksheet has lots and lots of detail. So when he has that, I'll walk through it.
Gordon, is this the file you're talking about?
It should say 01.17.23. That's it.
Okay. Let me get it
Okay.
shared via Zoom then real quick.
Pardon
Be
me?
good to go. Let me get it shared via Zoom. We'll be good to go. Just one moment.
All right. While
There we
he's
are.
doing that, there are 3 tabs you'll see with a blue highlight, the expenditure summary, the funding summary, and the summary dash branch REB is revised. That just means I did a couple things to it. The capital improvement data is just the raw data. The summary by branch with JW is Jake's worksheet. I just decided to not try and manipulate his. I just did a few things separately with it. So Cody, when you're ready, let me know.
We're all good to go, Gordon. Thank you.
Okay, so if you will click on the summary branch revised. Okay, that what you're going to see here, trying to recall, I think we had this at the last meeting, but this is the summary of construction land. What's highlighted in that bright green, you'll see columns D through J, is comparing the construction components, that's columns D, E, and F, and the land components, which are columns G, H, and I, and then the total over under budget for both of those is column J. So column J is really nothing more than sum of column F and column I. Cody, if you'll scroll to the right, okay, column K through Q, that's the actual number paid. You want to scroll down for me a little bit? Okay, in column Q, you're going to see 103,198,000. That's going to be on the schedules we'll talk about. If you scroll to the right some more, you'll see the estimates to completion of each of the components. And then if you go further to the right in column AA, and just keep scrolling over because I want them to see the number of vendors that are included in this detail. Okay, there's a lot. Obviously, the big dollars are JE done, but you can see how many disbursements there are. It is a significant amount of detail. Okay, I will point out on, I don't have that line number, but you're going to see at the bottom of that detail a yellow highlight in the left column with 3 question marks, and I think that project code is 5015. Those are, as Quan explained to me, those are shared costs that were not coded to an individual branch. They obviously show up on the vendor detail in that form. In Jake's summary, he has done some form of allocation. You can keep scrolling to the left. He's done some form of allocation to all of the branches. I didn't go back and try and figure that out. That's for the people that are doing the review. But you can see that you can see the detail at this point. So click on the capital improvement data tab, Cody, just for a second, so I can just tell people what that is. So the columns there, columns A through G are just the details. You can sort and slice and dice it as you wish, but that's just every transaction that has occurred. Cody, click on column G. No, just click on one of the cells and hit the end button and then the down arrow. And you'll see, what is that, 4,200 some lines? So there's over 4,000 lines of just individual disbursement transactions that have taken place with PropL. That's a lot of data. I mean, it's a lot of data, but in the data world, that's not a lot. So, okay, so let's go back up to the funding summary, because those are the pages I handed out to the board. Okay, what you have here is really the pieces that were requested, have been requested, and we're finally getting, I think, we're getting our arms around where things stand. This is a comparison of the actual as of December 31st, 2022. The original budget, and the earliest I could find a budget, was the 2018 and 19 budget book, and then you'll see the over/under. There was really no funding budget in the 2017 plan, which is this piece here. The only thing that was in there was the cost budget, which I'll get to on a separate page here. But just to go down those, the components of the funding were the initial capital fund balance. You'll see that I took out the other projects that were in the budget book at the time. That was roughly 9 million, and so that number syncs up. The 2018 certificate proceeds, the debt proceeds were budgeted 80 million. That's what they came in at roughly. Tax revenues, those are the allocations of revenues, what I'll call off the top. There's two ways that this was done. The two sections there, the transfer from the general fund are revenue transfers that occurred after the end of the fiscal year. So the budget for what I'll call the off the top and allocating revenues before setting an operating budget. The budget was 8 million. The actual number transferred, the actual number allocated was a little over 9 million. The transfers from the general fund, again, those occur after the end of the fiscal year. You'll see that was 14,342,000. The budget had two components, had the 9 million, what was labeled new tax revenues, and then the general fund reserve at the time was 3.7 million. So the allocation, the budgeted allocation was 12.7, the actual was 14.3 million. We had land donations on two different branches, and then you'll see the property disposal proceeds. Those were, again, two components, 3.5 million in the budget book, but there is 2,050,000 in the spending budget in the original 2017 plan. That was an offset to the land cost allowance. So all I'm doing is grossing the numbers up. So in the aggregate, the budget, the funding budget was 115,250,000. The funding sources, including non-cash transactions, is 118.4 million. But if you go down, you'll see that I took out the cash funding transactions. So where the cash funding was budgeted to be 115.2, we've actually funded on the cash level at this point $114.8 million. Okay. Go to the other page. Cody, if you go to the expenditure summary.
Can I just ask a question? So are you saying that from 2018 to 2019's budget to the actual today, we came in under? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the original, I'm going to call it the plan because that's the first one I saw, called for funding of 115 million. Okay. On a cash basis, we've allocated 114 million. Okay. So let's get to this piece, and I think the rest will come into focus. On the expenditure side, okay, the yellow highlight is the paid plus the estimate complete plus the projected total. So column F, if you go again, I'm not going to take you back and forth between tabs, but if you go back to the summary branch, you'll see that 103 million is what is over in that in the paid column through November. The estimate complete is also coming off that tab as well. So you'll see that all things considered in column G there, you'll see, and I highlighted the number there, total expenditures paid plus projected are $129,930,000+. The column that's highlighted in the green there is again, the initial capital spending budget that came off this book. And I show the components there. I show you the 113.2 because that's the number that's in the book, but I grossed that up by the $2 million to get to the 115,250,000. And that was the balancing number back to the funding summary. So if we were on budget, we would have funded 115,250,000 and we would have spent 115,250,000. As it stands, you can see that for just the construction, the raw construction number, we are $19.1 million over the original budget. The rounding number is just that, it's a rounding number. The contingency, typically I would allocate that to all pieces, but in this case, I left it all with the construction. So even after the contingency, we're $13.9 million over the original plan. The architect budget was $8,450,000. The projection of the pay plus yet to be incurred or yet to be paid is $9.4 million, so $956,000 over budget. Land, pretty much a wash, you know. FF&E and IT and the moving and storage, kind of the same thing. 11.6 was budgeted. 11.5 was what is projected to come in. So 108,000 under budget on that. But look, again, going back down to the numbers I've highlighted, the projection is to spend 130. The original budget was 115.2. And that leaves it at $14.7 million over the initial budget of 17. The Riverside, because Riverside, the original Riverside plan was not to replace, that obviously has since changed. So when you take out Riverside, we're $7.1 million over the original plan. The sections code, if you'll scroll down, again, I'm just going to reconcile the total expenditures. You'll see 120.9 million. The non-cash transactions, the Green Hills land, Riverside, East Independence, the Eastleigh Summit land donation, and the Withers land donation. It's a net cash expenditure of actual plus projected of 126,341,000. And then the net cash funding sources, again, coming off the other page that I handed out, was 114,840,000. So that yields an $11.5 million cash efficiency based on what has been planned, either spent or, on Prop L or is yet to be done. You go down below there. Can you scroll up a little bit more, Cody? Scroll down, I'm sorry, scroll down. So the last two sections of this was presented here. One of the items that was discussed was the interest on the bond funds that were held. That was the Natixis transaction. That is $3,740,000. That money went into the capital fund. It was spent, but again, from the standpoint of how things were done, excluding that, the number is 11.5. When I throw that in, that gets to 7,761,000. If I could change that, I would probably do the way that the cash allocation was done and put all that Natixis interest into the debt service fund, because really you didn't have, the only reason you have $3.7 million of interest income is because you borrowed $80 million and didn't spend it all right away. So I don't think it's appropriate to, I don't think from the standpoint of measuring how we did against budget, that should go in there. From the standpoint of where we stand in terms of a cash deficiency, that money was in there and it's been spent. So I'm at 7.8 million. The last piece of information I just did there just for I guess understanding where the architect stands. The original budget was 10%. With what's up here paid plus projected, it'll be a little bit over 9% of the construction costs. So again, I don't know what the contract had. I know it, there may have been some other components in there, but again, that's not the purpose of tonight to go through that detail. That's where we stand. This is something I said on the cash side we're going to have to deal with. We have, going into November, a $14+ million deficiency in cash. I don't have an answer tonight. I didn't intend to have a discussion about an answer tonight. I think it's something that staff should address and evaluate and come back with where we go. So any questions?
I'm not sure if it's for you or for you. So we have, I mean, we vote every time that there's like a cap that we put on the projects. And so, there's a lot of numbers in front of us. And I understand that we added an elevator here. We did some other things there. And I don't know if you've probably broken that down somewhere, but like from what we're projected, like what we set out, this was our budget, just like we did for East Independence, we just, we have for Riverside. Have we stayed within the budgets, or have we just for every single one exceeded the budget that we had set out?
If you go back to Cody, click on the summary branch revised tab. In column F, the first three, the yellow highlighted columns are columns D. D is the original, that is the combined paid plus projected. The column E is the location level budget. Again, that was what was in the original book, and you'll see the over and under there for each location. And again, because Riverside came in late in the picture, so you are again just comparing the location. That's really what this top line total is the 19 million. You'll see that in line, whatever that is, 40.
It's pretty small, but in column F, in column
Cody, we
F,
blow that up.
Is column F 13 million, or is it?
Column F is, 19 million in the aggregate. When you take out Riverside, it's 13.1 million.
Right. So
back to your question on each. So column F represents the over under the original budget for each location.
So so you've got 19 million total and you're adding 6. How did you get 13?
No, it's subtracting 6.
Oh, subtracting 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as an example, the Woodneath Auditorium, the original budget was 4,180,000. The actual incurred is 7,230,000. That individual project went over budget by over $3 million.
Lori, let me give you a kind of as we were going, the guaranteed maximum price is the guaranteed maximum price that came from J.E. Dunn. And so all their related activities. So the guaranteed maximum price, land acquisition is outside the guaranteed maximum price. So in some cases.
Set fees, like, I mean, I was just looking at.
It's really, what we are paying J.E. Dunn for construction of the building. I'm going to use the example of East Independence. So East Independence, the guaranteed maximum price came in, but the price of the library includes what it takes to put staff in there, what it takes to put a collection in there. So the guaranteed maximum price really is focused on the contract that we have with J.E. Dunn. So it's 6.2. If it comes at 6.3, J.E. Dunn absorbs the $100,000. If it comes in at 6 million, we actually get $200,000. So that's why it's called a guaranteed maximum price. So the contract with JE Dunn, these projects have a history of, kind of cost overruns and the like. But understand that guaranteed maximum price, a really good example of this would be Grain Valley. Grain Valley, where there was a substantial, addition in square footage to that. So that guaranteed maximum price included the board approved expansion of the project beyond the original, program that was out there. So actually, I've asked staff, or I'm curious, there are probably 8 to 9 different decision points along the way where the board approved an expanded scope, an elevator there. Lee Summit had parking lot issues. Raytown had an opportunity to put an elevator in. And so I think it would good be sort of see that. So the original budget was what we had, but along the way, think of like you're going in and remodeling your house. Oh my gosh, while we're here, shouldn't we go do this other, this other room or this other little project while we have, people there?
So I'm just concerned, like I'm looking on here, I mean, I haven't studied this, but I'm seeing like that the architecture fees were like $9.4 million. That wasn't included in J Dunn's quotes, architect fees?
Yeah, they were separate. Those are
They're
separate contracts.
separate contracts, they're separate agreements.
What I'm trying to
But in
show,
the proposed budget though, that's what I'm saying, in the proposed budget for
Well,
those, they're not included?
okay, just to go back, the section, Cody, click on the expenditure summary tab. The left one there, and scroll up, please. Okay, so lines, whatever that is, thank you. Line 5, so line 8, the total construction represents the construction cost. That includes JE Dunn, that includes anything that's related to all these. Again, you have to go back and look at the vendors, and there are numerous vendors. So that I think of the 103, the JE Dunn, that actually the 7. I'm guessing on numbers. Okay, I don't want to do that. So the bulk of that is the JE Dunn costs. Okay, and the original budget, again, go back to the 17 plan, was 84.5 million. There is a contingency load, which is common, of 5%. That's about what that is at 5.2 million, was the contingency load for changes or other costs. The architect was separate. So in the aggregate, when you look at the two, when you look at just the project itself, and you're ignoring land and the other, and the furniture and the IT equipment, you're in excess of $20 million over the original budget. Just and ignore the contingency because the original budget was 84.5 plus 8.5 for the architect fees. So your overage is almost over 20 million. The contingency is an offsetting inset, so it takes you down to about 15 million, which is where the highlight is on line 22. The 14.68 million is your overage.
So maybe from a building perspective, when we're presenting to the board, maybe like, I mean, in my opinion, if I hired somebody to build my house, I would assume that that would include some things, right? So maybe we haven't done our shopping the way that we should be doing to where if it's not including, I mean, to go over some of these, I mean, did our budget that we were saying, okay, we're going to build this building, did we not include that we were going to have furniture in the building and we were going to have to paint the walls and do carpeting? I mean, some of those things have to be budgeted. I mean, if I'm going to go build a house, I want to know the final price of the house. And so I just don't know if we didn't do our homework well, or if I'm just trying to.
I think part of the confusion for me is that we're comparing apples and oranges here. I think Mr. Cook has worked hard on comparing our current expenditures with the 2017 plan, which was prior pandemic, prior adjustments, prior inflation, prior everything. It makes it very hard for us then to understand what has happened since then. What has happened up until about a year ago is we started with the budget and then we looked at current needs. and the current prices of things. And we came up with a guaranteed maximum price. And each time that came up, it was discussed, it was decided, it was analyzed, it was board approved. So I guess for me, I do not understand why we don't compare the cost to what we approved to see if there are overages, because I'm still speaking.
I know, I'm raising my hand for when you're done.
It creates a situation where we're scrutinizing things based on a new system. And that's fine, but I would like an analysis. I would like us to stick with how it was decided upon and judge our performance based on that. Otherwise, we can never move forward. The money has been spent. We decided on the guaranteed maximum price. Are we paying that price? Have we gotten what we paid for? That's what we've done, 17, 18 times with these work packages, 32 times for different buildings and two more times for the new buildings. We've gone through this. We've discussed them at the time. We've discussed the implications. There was one point where we're going to make a money transfer at the end of the into the capital projects funds, but because of the pandemic and urgent needs, we decided not to. Those were board decided upon and approved decisions over and over and over again. And now we're going to go back and say that was all wrong. We should have done it this way. Fine. Didn't. Can't we start today? Go ahead. I'm done. Go ahead,
Michelle.
I guess where I'm saying, we did, yes, approve those. I mean, I was in the same meetings where we knew we were going over budget. Because my issue is the dashboard was inaccurate. I mean, up in Clay County, I drive around all the time and I see construction projects that are just flat out stopped because they just don't have the money. Houses that aren't being built. I see gas stations that have stopped, that they ran out of money, and so they've stopped. We have not stopped spending money. We just kept spending because inflation and we needed to get these done. But the reality is now we've spent our budget and we have promises that we've made. And where does that come from now? I guess that's my biggest thing. That dashboard was inaccurate. Whether we agree or not, I mean, I think in staff, if I heard correctly in the meeting the other day, they agreed with the numbers that, I mean, we're over budget. I mean, that is what it is. I mean, so I guess now it's for us to figure out where it comes from. But I mean, we don't have the money. That's the thing. I mean, we're out of the money that we budgeted is, I guess, my issue. And we have a lot of big things planned. So that's what I'd like to know is where it comes from now.
Right.
I'm going to ask Teresa to send this around. I get up early in the morning and I see all the news headlines, and I was struck by an announcement by the Kearney School District. So I'm not in the Kearney School District, and apparently the voters there in April approved, a capital plan. This was April, I mean, less than a year ago, and they're involved in a complicated conversation like we're having a complicated conversation is, can they afford to go build this new 5th building, that they had. So Lori, in my wish of all wishes, as the person who doesn't do the home repairs in my own house, I wish we had all been able to kind of accelerate this 1 year earlier, because if we had accelerated it 1 year earlier, got it completed 1 year earlier, we wouldn't have been kind of in the buzzsaw. I'll just call it that way. So understand, we made thoughtful. I should thank the building committee members who participated in that, because we stopped and we said, 15,000, well, let's go down to 12,500. We took $5,000 square feet out of the program, mindful of the fact of the things that we were seeing and the things that were coming on. Who knows what a bid for Riverside will come back and be. And so that might, cause some pause for recollection. But to Gordon's point and to Michelle's point And to Joycelyn's point, I will sign a notarized document that say we have a liquidity problem. I will sign a notarized document that said is that we need a financial strategy that can address these issues. I point out, and I don't do this in an aggressive fashion, I was reluctant to reduce our levy because I was not entirely clear about what might play out relative to the system coming up to scale, other construction costs, but it's a reality, and it's a reality that sticks with us for 2 years. So I made a note to myself. This is a lot to absorb. Frankly, I will go home and I circled key numbers and I made points to myself and think about it more. But the analysis, even if we all agreed on analysis, we now have a problem to solve. And then how do we solve the problem? So, I was appreciative. It was at my initiation that the staff wrote a 3-page memo from, December 9th. I think it would be good or helpful to say, is that a starting place, or should we challenge staff to come back with other strategies about what it is that it looks like? But from a go forward basis, my view, the focal point of our conversation could be, how do we solve this particular problem? Because we have a gap. And so there are any number of different ways to strategize really around that. And so we need to move from sort of the analysis to strategies and tactics about how to address a funding gap. So like I said, I appreciate the work of everybody that was on the building committee. I actually appreciate the support because understand is that we were generally very enthusiastic about our building program, and each one was a new civic asset to a new community. I will say by what it is that I understand might happen or not happen to the Kearney new, elementary school up there, because, they're out in the market and they're out talking to their, vendors, and we very well may come back with a bid that is just, I'll put my head down on the table and.
I mean, I think it is what it is. I mean, the numbers aren't lying, and whether we sit here and say apples to apple, whatever. I mean, the reality is, I think a lot of us on a lot of different aspects, we can sit here and place blame or say whatever, but there was a lot of information, and this is for another time and other, that we got that wasn't accurate. So a lot of us made decisions on inaccurate information, period. And so I don't regret any of the buildings that I voted for. I don't regret any of them. I mean, they're great. They're wonderful assets to the community, but we have an issue.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I truly appreciate you saying that, because we're down to
we are, but at the end of the day, you have to admit too, Brent. I mean, we had the big dashboard, our big piece of paper that we went off of all the time, and it was all the different colors, and hey, this is what we've got going on, and these, 1, 2, 3, all the different. And all the different things. And so we, we voted based off of this. I mean, I don't know what we could have done different. I don't know, but we do have to, it is what it is.
I'll take responsibility for the dashboard, because I said it would be helpful for us to be able to track the project.
Yeah, but you were, I don't think that's fair, Brent.
So anyway,
you were the one doing it.
So
I don't think that's fair. You're a chair of the committee. I don't think you were the one putting it all together.
So anyway, where I am at is we have really one last building project to finish. I'm gonna acknowledge that there are maintenance issues and things like that, but from the capital standpoint of building, we have one last project to finish. So how do we do so? And how do we do so in a thoughtful fashion that leverages the expertise of our professional staff, our vendors, or architects and the like? How do we honor the relationship and the investment that Riverside has made, because that money is in our bank account? We actually are a tenant on their corner right now, because they own the lot and they're allowing us to be there. I think it's for $1, $1 a year. So I look around the room. We're thoughtful people, we're creative people, we're imaginative people, and how we might solve it might really sort of differ, but we have to sort of come forth with a bunch of ideas or strategies that we can sort of implement that allow us to achieve a reduction in the funding gap, so that it isn't to the detriment is that we have to have widespread reduction of services to other patrons within the entire library district. And I'm committed to that. So if somebody wants to sit down and say, well, let's noodle together, but in some senses, it requires some level of understanding about public finance. It requires, can we take short-term loans? Can we do tax anticipation notes? Staff has done some work really around that. So acknowledging that we have a gap and this is the gap, well, then what it is that we do to kind of respond that. And so understand is that the gap is at the end of the entire construction program. And Riverside, I'm looking, if it started and we approved it, these bills would be coming in over calendar year 2024. And so the bill doesn't come all due at once. The bill comes in over periods of time. So it's a way to time payments and things like this. We just have to apply ourselves. Excuse me, I talk too much and I'm all dried up. We just need to apply ourselves to the challenge of it. And it will be a challenge because it's important. This is compounded really by the liquidity problem. Our maturities do not match really what our anticipated known capital costs.
You want to say something?
Well, I agree with much of what you said. I also agree with much of what Michelle said. But I think in going forward, we have to look back at least a little at why was the dashboard incorrect? And as we're making decisions financially about the buildings that are coming forward, who's going to make sure that that information is correct going forward? And are we adding things that we don't have money to add? I mean, maybe being frugal is going to be a piece of how we're making decisions going forward if we're over budget. And I don't think the levy, I think that saying the levy doesn't make a dent in this number. So to say that, well, we shouldn't have done what we did with the levy, well, that doesn't have anything to do with anything.
So, Noel, let me provide a quick response. And I'm looking there. We have a new CEO. And we unanimously supported this CEO. And the CEO will have to grapple with this. And the CEO will have to work with the staff to sort of kind of get us to direct direction going forward. The other part of it is that, and I don't want to minimize anything, is that the work becomes extraordinarily a lot easier and more simplified when we shift from, we're not building any more buildings and we're moving to a maintenance schedule. And we can go in and look at it. And then the question is, can we afford to replace the roof this year or next year? And some of these projects, you can sort of time them or push them out or manage them in a more thoughtful sort of way. So the maintenance budget on these buildings, and it's a really wonderful strategy about budget for ongoing sort of maintenance, will be a fractional amount of what the cost for the whole capital program. So it will be instructive about how it is you do project management, if you would, and instructive about how it is that you monitor cash allocations, going forward. That will be informing a maintenance program because the building program largely will be concluded. And frankly, that was one of the propositions about Proposition L. Hey, if you approve Proposition L, we will build a set of buildings that will last for 20 years. It was a generational investment in a capital plan and a capital program. And I come back to this one point, we're just down to one last project, and then we shift to the issues of, well, how do we do maintenance on them?
Can I just make a last comment? And I'd like to rewind the clock too. That's hard to do. Cody, click on the summary branch revenue. As I explained the finance committee meeting, the dashboard should have been columns D, E, and F, okay? Or a combination of this schedule. And as I understand, it wasn't. So the method of managing a massive project of this nature, you are always looking at your actual plus your projected against a plan. I'm not aware, and I was off the board for a few years, but I'm not aware that a schedule like this was ever presented, okay? So presenting the board with piecemeal projects along the way doesn't allow the board to look at the aggregate total and say, where do we stand relative to the original plan? And do we have enough money to fund all these revisions that were being made through the construction. And as I point out, you know, what I'm pointing out is that we haven't even funded the original plan. Okay, we're 400,000 short of even putting enough money into the original plan. So saying this is what happened and this was what we did, I understand you made those decisions, but would you have made different decisions had you known you were going to be $19 million over budget? That's the pertinent question, I think. And
Take that one to my.
we do have a funding problem. Well,
Yeah, you know, I mean,
This is what
I'd like
it
to
is.
rewind the clock, as I said, but you know, on a forward basis, any project that's done has to be managed against an expected number. It can't be a moving target just because the contractor comes back and says cement went from $12 to $14 a yard. Okay, that has to be taken into consideration of what you're going to do, and whether steel prices went up or whatever. But somehow, you know, there's only so much coming in, and again, the representation all through last year, and I'm just going to read, you know, the representation was that there was more than adequate funds in the capital fund to do this, including through 2024, and that just wasn't the case. Okay, that was not the case. The 6.8 million was identified in June. Nobody acted on that. Okay, so this is, I agree, Brent, this is where we are. We have an issue. We don't have just a liquidity issue. We have a spending issue. Again, I will point out that the projection in June was for $24.8 million for the next 2 fiscal years. That total on that cash flow schedule is $30.7 million. That's almost $6 million in 6 months. We have to do a better job of managing against a plan. And if we're not going to do that, we'll run out of money, I'll guarantee you.
Well, and I think now, I mean, I think we've said, I'm hoping that maybe we've laid it out and you've done your thing, and now, welcome, Erin. I mean, I you know, I feel like that's the best we can.
Sure. I'd rather have it known now than 6 months from now.
Well, it doesn't seem to me like we have as much of a spending issue as we do just a reporting issue, because we wouldn't have spent the money, we wouldn't have made these votes if we just had the right information in front of us.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to comment on a couple of things that have been raised here during this discussion. One of the first things I always look at in a budget is not the first part of the budget, but the indices at the back of the budget. And so I looked at the June 30, 2022 budget. And it compares the 2021 property taxes, which are a little over 60 million. And then the 22 property taxes, 55.7. So that's a $4.9 million drop in property taxes. And let me tell you, I don't know who voted how. I haven't checked anybody's voting record. I haven't checked anything that occurred in the past. I'm not blaming anyone for anything. It's just that I'm looking at reality, the most current audited statements that we have. So we had 4.9 million less property tax revenues at the end of June 30. That's a building, depending on where it's located. And the tax reduction from the 2016 levies in effect for the next fiscal year. So that probably will exceed 5 million, of course, at that point. So I know where I'm thinking about, I want to go is obviously I want to go back to the original 2016 levy amount and count on those dollars to finish the construction. And then it will be ongoing for maintenance. And then I think in the report that we had, I think it was last month, the staff recommended a transfer of 8 million from operating fund to capital fund. So that's a one-time transfer, but I think we have potential of 2 sources of revenue to help meet this cash flow and expenditure obligation that we have. Thank you.
Next topic. Okay. Next up is the is the Prop L review scoping expert. I went through this. I'm going to go through the same discussion here that I did at in the Finance Committee meeting. At the time the initial project was approved, there were a number of things that weren't known, one of which was that we were $20 million over the original budget. And I think that brings a different viewpoint about what's happened and where the money has been expended. We did not know the liquidity issues at the time. Those became known late. I believe Quan, I think you said you became aware of liquidity issues last spring sometime. That was not communicated to the Finance Committee. But with regard to this scoping project, if you remember from the initial discussions we had in this, I think in August, was that there would be an initial phase and then subsequent phases. The initial phase was to kind of get an idea of what the procedures might be and the degree of testing that should be done. That's what this scoping project is. The concern I expressed to the Finance Committee was that the way the RFQ was worded, I would expect to receive a wide variation, right? Wide range of responses in regard to fees, because one, I would never expect them to do a fixed fee arrangement unless they define procedures. But given the amount of detail and the amount of transactions and the breadth of this project, I could see fees coming in the range of $50,000 to $250,000. We budgeted 60 in total. The second thing, again, the purpose of the review is to give some assurance to the board and the public that we use funds as intended, we're in compliance with contracts, we're following industry standards with regard to billing and payments. For the sake of the respondents, something that is as well defined is going to allow them to provide a more accurate fee range in their response. And if we don't do that, I can see the same thing happening as has happened with the disbursement project, where we have to go through a second round of interviews with, and they have to go through a second round of quoting. That incurs time that is nothing more than delay that. The next concern that I expressed was that the RFQ, as it was currently crafted, puts staff in between the board and the review function. This should be a review by someone independent of both staff and the board. Really no different than what I'll call the financial statement audit. Financial statement audit, the staff has no say in the scope, no say in what is audited. That is obviously done for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the financial statements. But if we have staff in between, it impairs the independence of the expert, because then they're reporting to staff, and we're actually, quote unquote, I hate to say audit, but staff is in charge of auditing itself. Staff will be directing a review of its own activities, and it creates a potential for conflict of interest. I asked the attorney to review the board and the statutes. He has opined that we are within the board policy, and we have the authority under RSMO 182.630. It is subparagraph 9 if you want to go down that level. It is not uncommon that the board policy allows us to hire an expert. So he's already opined on that. Again, part of the reason for the change in approach, again, last September, we thought this would just be a normal review, nothing unusual. I think the numbers that we finally now have shed a different light on this thing, or shine a different light on this. And I'm not a construction expert. I'm not aware that anybody on the board is a construction expert. And I don't think the board, given that, should be deciding what the procedures are, and I don't think staff should be deciding what the procedures are to review this. So by bringing in a third party who is independent, and again, independence is a must in this process. It eliminates staff bias. It eliminates any ability for staff to influence the selections they do, the type of evaluation they do. The staff will not be able to direct the work of the expert, and staff will have no influence on the final report that is presented to the board. The process, I did invite Andy Erpeldine from CFO Systems. Again, I disclosed, I know the founder. I've not worked with CFO Systems. As they explained, they are about 200 strong nationally. They've been in business since 2004. They have 20 people locally, one of which is a 30-year construction industry expert. They have expertise. Obviously, the firms, there'll be other firms we go to that will have construction expertise, and they will go out to bid. But I think if we do it if we take this approach, we will have, and they'll have this data to help them put together kind of the frame, what I call the scope and the framework of this, so that when we ask people to respond and bid, they will have I think a very good handle on what it is we are asking of them. And obviously that has to come back through the finance committee and the board regardless before the RFQ goes out. So it's not like they're going to dictate how we're going to function. They're advising us on how we should function. It will be the board's decision ultimately about what goes out the door. So the motion, it was initially written subject to legal review. That has been cleared. So the motion to the board is to improve engaging an expert to assist the finance committee and the board with defining the scope and framework of the Prop L capital plan review. Such input to be used in the RFQ with such cost not to exceed $8,000 of the previous board approved total project cost of $60,000.
Second. The second.
I'll second.
Second discussion.
But I'm sorry. I want to say that after the meeting, after the meeting on Thursday, an email was sent to the full board requesting the names of others they wanted to be considered for this piece of the project, and I have received no responses.
Discussion. We're at discussion now on the motion.
Yes, discussion, yes.
Thank you. I wasn't here for the September vote, obviously, so I'm not quite sure what took place there. But having board discussions here and then finance committee discussions, I think I've heard a lot about this subject. And I guess, Gordon, what I think at this point in time, I'm not sure. I think we probably generally agree on what the deficit is. I think we've talked about it enough. And so I guess let me ask a question. Why do we need any scoping study? Why do we need someone to help with the scoping study? I just think we have to set up, this board should decide on I mentioned a couple of issues I would look at, how we fill this deficit. I don't know why I want somebody to tell me what I think I already know. That's my question.
The purpose is not to define the deficit. The purpose is to make sure that we're spending $130 million that are, the only people that have looked at any of the detail for staff.
Well,
and you have work again. Regardless of how you look at it, the original plan was 85 million. If you want to throw in the contingency, it's 90, and we're spending 103 plus million. So for the benefit of the taxpayers who have funded this, who were told that this was what we were going to ask them to fund, we've gone over budget. And I don't know that everything has been done in accordance with industry standards. There may be things that they find. If it comes back, with a blue ribbon and everything's, I still think it's money well spent because, as I explained, the way the project was managed probably could have been done differently. Otherwise, you would not be 20 million over budget.
Tristan.
I agree with Bob. I don't think that we need to spend $60,000 to know what we already know. I would like to ask the chair why my memo from May 28th, 2022 has not even been addressed by the finance committee. And I will read it so that everyone will know what I'm speaking about. It says here, I would like to address the board's decision to provide an additional outside audit of the capital plan expenditures related to Prop L funding. I ultimately voted for the motion because an objective outside audit beyond the scope of our annual audit seemed to be the only avenue to address the concerns of some board members wanting to provide a thorough accounting of how the capital projects related to Prop L were and are managed. While these expenses are only a portion of the comprehensive Proposition L promises, it seems to be the main issue for several board members. I asked the Finance and Audit Committee to take a prudent step further to ensure that the entities eventually selected are truly free from conflicts of interest, vested interests, entanglements, and connections to MCPL, its boards, including board members, and the district and the county served. In order to build trust, accountability, and transparency in this endeavor, I asked that the company selected be completely unconnected from the board collectively and individually, MCPL senior administration, and have no connections, personal and professionally, with the counties we serve, which is Clay, Platte, Jackson counties. In addition, their work, while in professional cooperation with staff has to provide the files and information, right? Should not be directed by the board, nor should any member of the board be involved in directing the process. Every effort should be taken to make sure that the $60,000 allotted for this audit is truly done with autonomy, objectivity, and skill, since that is what the public deserves and is the basic rationale for this expenditure. Thank you.
So
do
if I'm, okay.
Are you of the mind that?
If we're gonna do it, the board shouldn't be involved either.
Well, expand on that. If the board shouldn't be involved in that, who does it?
We should come up with what we want done, and whoever audits it does it. We should not be directing either side. Either side should not be. If we want it objective, let it be objective.
But isn't that the point of
That's what I'm proposing.
bringing somebody else in?
No, you're saying that the board should direct it. I'm saying the board should not.
I'm saying the board will select. The board has to select, that's the.
But you're proposing
No,
a
time out,
company of which you know.
I'm suggesting that because nobody on this board has construction expertise about architects' contracts, about construction contracts, billing methods, what's standard in the industry, not standard. I don't know how you get somebody to say, according to you, I should just open up and say, have that, and when you get done, send me a bill. You're talking about $300,000 to $400,000 of expenses.
I'm talking about somebody. Can I speak to what I'm talking about?
I have the floor, so let me finish, okay?
Okay.
So the purpose of this is to have a framework, so when it goes to people like Forbes, okay, who obviously I assume they'll respond. I don't know. Whoever wants to respond can respond. But if you send me an RFQ that says here are 4,280 transactions, and there's 75 vendors and there's 32 contracts, and just tell us what you spent and we'll be happy. You will never end up with anything of any value, because you have to define, this is not an audit per se. This is a special procedures engagement. You have to tell them exactly what you want that to do. And in my view, it takes someone who knows this industry, okay, who knows this industry and how it works, to say this is what we would recommend. They are not, the board still has to approve it. You can't just have an open book.
May I clarify, since you misunderstood me and are putting words in my mouth? What I'm saying is, it should not be our buddy. It should be somebody totally independent of any person on this board for it to be truly, truly objective.
If you're taking the fact that I know the founder of a company, okay, it's no different than you selected the architect. You selected the architect because your former CEO had a relationship with your architects. Okay, you did make it. I was on the board at the time. A typical or a typical proposal would include fees. I remember the discussion. We will discuss fees after we make the selection. You unfortunately just lost all your negotiating leverage. You have none, okay? Because you told them, you said you're going to work with them, so you're going to get their rates and you're going to get their fees. You have no leverage whatsoever, okay? The fact that I know Brett Freebert has, I think is an incredible stretch to say that this is a cronyism or an inside job. I know Brett because I know him, okay? It's no different than I now know Renee Larson, who is the partner for Vorbis. So should we eliminate them because we now know them?
I'm saying.
Everybody has a relationship somewhere. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I think there was, I'm sorry, but I'm going to interrupt. There was also a really large donation, we could do this all day long about even who got the construction contract too. And we could do a lot of this back and forth on what was given, back to the library on a lot of things. I don't know that we're solving anything, but
You guys are arguing things I have not said. There's a big difference between who builds the house and who audits your books. I'm saying if there is a difference of opinion between staff and the board as to how things were done, then I would say the audit needs to be independent of staff and the board.
I was trying to figure out why you're so upset when we are $19 million over, Joycelyn.
I have the floor. Thank you. If I may finish, all right? I think that it should be separate and independent of the staff, the board, and even the counties we serve if we're going to get something truly independent. We have a county that sued us over Proposition L, okay? I think if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna take $60 million, $60,000 that we could put towards a new building or a community in need, then let's do it right and let's get our hands out of it and let's truly get truth and not from a certain bias. And the only way to do that is hands off. I really disagree.
I just want to ask a question. I mean, out of respect, for stay, and we are definitely, I mean, I don't know if it's even an option, Mr. President, to table this proposal for maybe 30 days to where you have a chance to look at what was presented and to evaluate and give your input or to the board. I mean, I am, every time we come together, it seems to be so much information, and I know personally it's overwhelming. And I can definitely see everybody's points, and I just was wondering if that's even an option for us to table it for 30 days. Do you know the answer?
Yeah, it is, tabling legally, it's certainly an option. Yeah, tabling is in fact an option, but going back to some other commentary, the relationship between an entity and an outside independent examiner auditor is always between that outside independent organization and the board. Typically a board of trustees representing the shareholders. In this case, the board of trustees, board of directors representing the shareholders. In this case, the board of trustees representing the taxpayers, the voters, the users. And again, there is an inherent issue if we have a level in between that has some kind of a determinative effect on the independence, because you really can't have somebody who's auditing respond to the people making the decisions. It has to be to the independent body, which of course is the board. So I would totally agree that the lines of communication must be between, just as we do with our examination or audit of the financial statement. The report is always addressed to the board of directors, board of trustees, and other companies, the board of directors. Now, obviously, the staff, the executives of the audited company are intimately involved to provide information, but that's the extent of it. Please. Brent.
I'm not clear from the motion if if I voted yes, whether the performing firm would be prohibited from doing the subsequent work. And is there an answer to that question?
The motion that the finance committee did not exclude them. I don't, no, here's the thing. We could take this out to another party. We could take this out to half a dozen firms and ask them to do it. I would not exclude them from the process because they may have the best qualifications. I don't know who's going to end up with this. No different than the disbursement review. 4 of us ended up with it. That was surprised. They've done a very nice job with it. And it really depends on what these firms have for expertise. This is not construction industry expertise is just not common across the board.
Even more broadly.
Just a couple.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, just a couple. Actually, I looked at the law and the statutory reference is right. And so anyway, and I appreciate the fact that we had our attorney engage them really around this because this is a tricky place. What it is. We have a policy that supports professional services as a matter of past practices, whether it was attorneys or whether it was accountants or whether any number of professional level services. I've sat in here and listened to 6 architectural firms, seek our business. I know that we've had reviews of other professional services. I'm just a little unsettled, a little uneasy about the ideas that somebody can write an RFP, but then are not explicitly prohibited from performing on the services because you can write them in such a fashion that you could secure it. So, if we proceed for that reason and that reason alone, I would be voting no. It's a little disingenuous and said, well, I told you on Thursday if you had any other firms, because we have to go to them because they're so scarce and they're so rare that in my volunteer time, I can come up with another firm to bring them forward and bring them into the conversation tonight. I don't necessarily doubt their skill or their ability. I'm just unaware. I'm a little wary about if there's not an explicit prohibition, is that they write the RFPs that they're precluded from performing on the RFP. If they were to be, if I think they should be prohibited from offering their professional services for the remainder of the contract.
Can I respond? We're not approving CFO systems tonight. We're approving an expert. So if you have, or anybody else on the board has other experts you want to be considered, the deadline for that is the next finance committee meeting. And obviously some time so we can have a discussion with them and let them know what the request is. We're not approving CFO systems.
I would like to see what we're asking in order to even approach this. This is not enough information to make a decision. It's just too nebulous, and it's not enough information.
Well, with all due respect, Joycelyn, if we take that approach, we will never do this. You'll never get done because the board, again, the board does not have the expertise to write these procedures. Okay. I don't think it should fall on the finance committee or me as the only finance person with this type of background to have to make that decision. I don't want to make that decision. Okay. That's why I recommended to the finance committee. It was a 4-0 vote. They can change their mind tonight. You're welcome to do that. It's your prerogative, but we don't have the expertise. And to try and throw this out with, if it makes you feel any better, the people that do this are in Kansas, so they're not connected to the county. I don't have their addresses, but I know they live in Kansas. So in terms of being, independent of the 3-county area, they are independent. But again, I'm going to say, I will guarantee you 4 of us will want to respond on this. And if you want Renee Larson and the audit partner bid on this, I will be happy to call them, okay, and have them bid on this component. But that puts, again, an existing relationship on the table. I don't know how you avoid that. I really don't. I've been,
Actually, let me just throw in place, in connection with this whole idea of relationships that automatically have somebody excluded. When I first met our legal counsel, visiting for a while, I found out that one of his partners was, two of them, in fact, were old acquaintances of mine. In fact, one of them is a musician at the choir where I go to church. Well, I clearly have a relationship with one of his partners who is the firm. And also of our current auditors, I knew two of the guys. One, may he rest in peace, is no longer with us, but I've known them for maybe a couple decades. So I think if you get in certain areas, it's kind of a small group. And, you know, if you've been around long enough, you've bumped into a lot of people and you do have acquaintances. So, but
One way you avoid it is you have an open, clear bidding process.
Aren't we trying, I'm sorry.
No, we're handpicking who bids.
No, with all due respect, we're approving an expert. If there are other people you want us to talk to, I will be glad to do that.
It should be an open bid process.
We're just trying to help some.
sure.
But it seems like we've done this in the past, since I've been on the board for a few years. We've had other people that have been known to a board member come and present, and we have engaged them in a professional service. So I don't know what the difference is here. And if we can, I would like to call the question and just maybe vote on it.
Yeah.
Michelle, did you want to finish?
She called the question.
Would you call the question? But we are very loose in Robert's rules, so.
Thank you. I went back and reread the last paragraph of the thing that was mailed out from the finance committee. So just because I looked at the agenda and I thought one company was presenting, then I thought then there was a relationship between the motion and so if the finance committee takes it up and, you know, another firm is available and we can make it known that other firms are available, they can come in. I'm prepared to support the motion, but I would ask the finance committee to go in and say, whoever writes the guideline is prohibited from performing on it. That in some senses that very well can narrow who does it. I want to avoid, I get to write.
I don't disagree with that.
And so, I mean, if the finance committee is willing to kind of take that in as a consideration when they next consider this in February, I just thought that we were taking some action tonight and then we were going to be off into the world. And so that's my failure to read.
I just want to say by excluding them, I mean, I don't know either party
or whoever.
So we have a $60,000 budget. We take out $8,000 to do the preliminary. By excluding them, they would have done a lot of the work ahead of time. We'll be able to get a second company to come in for $52,000. And so then we risk having a lot. Whereas if we have a company that's already done all of the work, they might do it. I mean, I just don't know if we had a $60,000 budget to approve an audit for $60,000 for one auditor. I'm just not sure. And you're saying that it's to do preliminary work so that we don't pay more than $60,000 is what you're saying, correct?
Is this RFP is too broad is what you're saying?
Yeah, right, because I'm saying
Yes.
we already approved $60,000, right?
The RFP is written to include, okay, review cost, build and payment applications for construction, et cetera, and for accuracy and allocation of proper payment. Compare and analyze the actual cost of the budget. We've done a lot of that work. Evaluate each construction contract. That is a huge wide range. Every construction contract, you're looking at, depending how that's interpreted, that's what I said, you could run up a $250,000 bill. Recommend control improvements during the review service and report to the board. So number 3 is the real problem, because if you're going to review every construction contract, you're actually going back and redoing the work. That gets into the weeds. It's no different than an auditor who says, okay, I'm going to test disbursements. They don't look at, Quan does how many disbursements a month? 3,000, 4,000. So let's say it's 50,000 a year. The auditor does not look at 50,000 disbursements. Okay, that's the problem with the way this RFQ is written, and it's very broad, and I think you're going to get just a wide mix of a wide range of responses, and it's going to take more time. So this approach, again, is intended to narrow the focus, get us honed, get the board honed in, because the board has to make the decision about what is ultimately done. This is not a standard financial statement audit. You can't just hand them the keys and say, go.
Any discussion? About.
Yeah, I do. I just want to, well, one, let me, I actually have built houses. I have built buildings. So I'm not offended, but the comment about nobody has construction experience. Houses are generally not like commercial structures. I get that. So second thing though is I'm just at a point to where I'm not sure what I'll learn by this framework study. I think, we're close to the end of the entire project, and I really don't like to spend, I don't want to spend 60 additional thousand. I know I mentioned again 2 sources that will help us get over the finish line with these buildings. We haven't discussed it. I'm not moving that as a motion, but my basic concern about this is spending. I'm not sure what I'll learn by this process that's going to make us up to $60,000, but I'm ready to make a decision on several things.
More discussion?
She called the question.
Other question?
But we have to vote on the call.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Call the question.
Record the Robert's rules.
Are we done now?
Has to be a motion. Requires a, I think there's a first vote.
Now he's. we have a different board.
Chairman, when you call a question, that's making a motion, right? So there has to be a second to that.
Yeah.
But I think it sounds to me like you are at the point where you've completed discussion. And if you have no further discussion, then I think it would be appropriate to go ahead and call for a roll call.
Do it anyway. And we did have a second.
Yes.
Confirm.
Yeah.
Okay, it's been moved in second.
Michelle is a second.
Michelle, second read. All right, it's been moved in and seconded that we pass the resolution as presented on the screen. All in favor? Well, let's do a roll call. Teresa, want to call the roll?
Absolutely. Ms. Wykoff,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Stapp,
Yes.
Mr. Shondemeyer,
Yes.
Dr. Pandolfi,
Yes.
Ms. Lemunion,
Yes.
Mr. Lazio.
Oh, abstain.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson,
Reluctantly, yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Ms. Virgo,
No.
Mr. Thies.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, the motion passes.
Okay, just the last item of business is an FYI. The Forest has completed their disbursements review. The draft report is in Quan's hands. We should have the vision later this week. Hopefully it will be distributed. We may just distribute that to the board as opposed to this finance committee. So, and they will present at the February meeting. And that's it for finance.
Librarians report.
Information turned it in. It's out there. It's not for discussion. I mean, it's just informational. There's no voting. That's what we turned in as a response.
Okay. So, I mean, this is the response to request for information about the facility and capital plan. I believe it's attached to the,
It's in order.
in the board docs, yes.
And it was emailed out.
Emailed out as well. Okay, and so now we're over to Jim, who has a report for us on quarterly statistics.
Okay, we made it through the second quarter, so halfway through the year. We're going to do our quarterly report on our core measures. So I'll review with everybody again, since we only do this 4 times a year. Remember our 3 core measures are active customers. Sorry, you guys can't see. Customer satisfaction and transactions, or the measurement of customer use. All right, Cody, next slide, please. Okay, we'll start with active customers. Go ahead. All right, so for active customers, we're going to show a few things here. You know, I've been up here now, 3 times in the last little while, because we smushed a couple of these together, but it's the same story. We're continuing to come back from the pandemic. That's not a surprise. We're probably about, probably next quarter, we ought to start to normalize a little bit. The one caveat to that might be active card holders. We've still got a little room to grow back to where we were. So you can see in the last quarter, we had a 9% increase in active card holders, which is great. But we're still about 10-12% short of where we were in, what would that be, in February of 2020, before the pandemic. So new card registrations, you're seeing those pop up. That's a pretty good number for us. These next 2 we'll show on the next slide. And then active student accounts, we have had a little bit of a decrease in the percentage of our student accounts that are active. That's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. It's still pretty high. Almost 59% of those cards that we have out in student hands are being used actively. So
I have a question. Is there any certain district that's happening in, or is that all across?
Yeah, so that's, we have agreements with, Susan, is it 18 now, 17?
17 or 18.
Okay, so 17 or 18 of our 21 school districts now have these cards in place. So this is across all of those. 59% of those cards are being used.
I just didn't know, like, on the decrease, if we could pinpoint that to like a certain district or something that would maybe.
Brian, do you know?
I know you guys can do.
Okay.
I mean, is that something that you guys can easily, and you guys can work wonders for that?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, yeah. All right, next slide, please. Okay, these are those 2 numbers I mentioned, but these are not updated. Orange Boy, our vendor partner, hasn't finished their quarter 4. You know, they go on the calendar year, so it's our quarter 2. But so the quarter 2 number for us isn't ready. So this is back to our quarter 3 numbers, which we looked at last time. We continue to have a higher percent of active households than most of the other comparable libraries, but our cardholder retention has slipped just a little bit, whereas we were consistently over those other folks. They've done some catching up. So next slide, Cody. We've heard we're going to have that number within the next week. So we might, if people are interested, we can send out an update. Okay, customer satisfaction. All right, Net Promoter Score, quick review. Net Promoter Score talks about how many people are supportive of you out in the community. You get a 9 or a 10, you're a promoter. If you rate as a 6 or below, you're a detractor. Subtract the detractors from the promoters, you get a Net Promoter Score. This is basically a number used across industries to be able to compare across industries what kind of support folks have. So next slide, please, Cody. Okay, remember our baseline, this was at the very beginning, back in 2017, we were at 91.8. We set a goal of 92. You know, that doesn't sound like a lot, but as everybody can understand, when you're starting at that high of a number, it's hard to go up. So we're down a little bit from the 91.8, you know, through the pandemic and the building program, we expected that to happen a little bit, but we've started to see an increase. You know, when our buildings aren't closed as much, folks are happier with us. That's pretty easy to see. And again, we have kind of this back end. We look at the surveyed customers on what they think of library programs. 98% continue to say very good or excellent. Okay, next slide, please, Cody. And our final usage measure, customer transactions. Okay, next slide. Okay, remember from last time, we set a goal this year of 13 million, which is the highest goal we've ever set. We hit 12.9 million, I think, before the pandemic. Last year we had set, last year there was a lot of uncertainty when we were setting that goal. We set it at 10.6 and made it all the way to 11.9. So this year we set this more aggressive 13 million goal. Halfway through the year, we're at 6.3 million. We think that has us on track to make it to 13 million, probably just a hair over, because our fourth quarter tends to be one of our largest quarters. Anybody remember why? That's right. Everybody's good at this now. Okay, yeah. So yeah, because of summer reading program, we ought to get a little bump at the end of the year. Okay, Cody, next slide, please. Okay, some of what makes up that transaction number: circulation, 6% increase, continues to come back. Virtual resources is pretty much stagnant at this point. We want to continue to grow that, but remember, lots of folks were using this while we were closed. Our internet access is up, kind of the same thing, people back in our buildings, people doing things. We did have a little bit, and Brian might be able to talk to this a little bit. We had a little bit of a snag with our Wi-Fi counting. We had to change a few things about it, and we saw actually a little dip in that over this quarter.
Yeah, it was on the guest Wi-Fi that the customers come in and use. The platform that we use to present them with the splash page changed the whole back end on us. We had to rework all of our web pages to work with that. And so it kind of cut into it just a little bit for a few weeks while we got that under control and got that back going again. But it primarily affected Android devices more than Apple devices, but it was kind of all across the board with Apple devices. So it took us a couple of weeks to get that under control.
And I've heard from our folks that it's back up to where they would expect it to be. So that number might even be a little bit depressed there. Program attendance continues to come back. This is still even Q2 here. And it will be that way for at least the next 2 quarters that we'll be comparing to virtual only programming. So, we're back in person now, so that number is obviously going to be higher. And then use of physical resources. This is one to keep an eye on. The universe is only so big here, but a lot of this is meeting room use and collaboration room checkouts. And those are really, like, a lot of our rooms are full on a regular basis at this point. So that, you add all that up, you get total transactions, a 7% increase. Again, continuing to come back. Cody, next slide, the last slide. And so this is just one last slide that continues to show, time. So, these numbers in the middle, fiscal year 2021, even fiscal year 1920, they're hard to compare to. They're not like any other year. So that's the reason why we've added a 5th year on this column. We left 18-19 on. It's a good comparison. And you can see here visually what we've been talking about. This bar here and this bar here, starting to get back to where this 18-19 bar is. And so with that, I know that was a lot in a short period of time, but it's getting late. So let's, what questions? Excellent. All right, thank you.
Next up, we have Justin, who will give us a brief presentation on security.
I'm going to stand over here just to make it a little more accessible as well. Good evening, everybody. I'm Dustin, the security director for Mid-Continent. I know most of you. We've all interacted at some point. I'm going to give you a brief overview of my department and what we do. There's a lot of misconceptions with the security department in the library. Why do you need one? What do you actually do? And so we're going to go through a little bit of that, show you some statistics, because I know everybody loves numbers. And in a brief, short 2 hours, we'll get out of here with a better understanding. No, we'll keep it quick. Okay. So Cody, next slide, please. So recently we went through a department restructure. Most of you who know me and were around when I started in January of 2019 know that I came in and I was an individual in person with no department. Throughout time, we've grown this department. We've implemented a ton of new resources into this organization, and we've been able to grow and develop. Recently, I was able to hire 3 more individuals, and we have now came into this structure. You'll see me at the top as the director. The associate director is Christy Sisk, who is going to be coming in this door right behind us here in a moment. Yeah. And then we've hired 2 new specialists who are going to be out in the branches, and a headquarters security coordinator who will actually sit out here in what we'll dub the fishbowl and interact with individuals as they come in. And they'll also help us with a lot of the admin functions of the security department. So Cody, next slide, please. So a lot of the common misconceptions, as I told you guys just a few minutes ago, why do you need a security department in a library? Well, when you think about a library, what are we? We're one of the last freestanding structures that anybody is welcome at and can walk through the door and not be expected to make a purchase. So who comes through the doors? Who do we serve? Well, the short answer is everyone. So we have every person from every walk of life, maybe having a mental health crisis or not, coming through our doors. So a lot of the misconceptions is, what could possibly go wrong? It's the library. Well, could someone with a substance abuse issue be in our library? Absolutely. And I've had people ask me, what do you do? Chase down people with overdue book fines? Like, you get into a foot pursuit if somebody tries to steal a book? You know, go knock on doors and try and collect fines? No, I'm not a collections department. And why do you have it? And do those cameras actually record things? Well, the answer is yes. So there are a lot of misconceptions out there with what I do for a living. And when people ask me what I do, and I'm like, well, I actually take care of security at a library, and they're just kind of puzzled. So many of you may be puzzled as well. That's why we're doing this. Cody, next slide, please. So here's just a breakdown of some of the duties and responsibilities. This isn't everything. Again, I didn't want us to be here all night, but I wanted you to have a general idea of what I'm doing, what Christy's doing, and what we're seeing out in our buildings. So we respond to calls at all of our branches. Obviously, we all know that our service district is large, 1,400 square miles. We go from Dearborn to Lone Jack and everything in between. The issues that are being presented at Dearborn are different than the ones that are being presented at Blue Ridge. So we have to respond differently to each individual one of those, delegate the work, make sure that we're responding in a timely manner, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, and make sure that we're dealing with the community needs in the way that is going to be most beneficial to not only the staff, but the customers as well. We answer questions about behavior. A lot of the times, a simple phone call will clear something up. Hey, Dustin, I had this strange encounter with this individual. What do you think we should do about it? I'll provide them with an answer or some direction and let the staff take it from there. Simply having somebody to bounce that information off of and have open communication can make all the difference. We provided training. When I got here, we had no training. I use that term loosely. We had some training, you know, your basic active shooter trainings that everybody takes online, things like that. But what I've been able to do is get out into the branches and see what the staff is experiencing every day. Who are they interacting with? What customer issues are they seeing? And we've been able to develop specific training for a library to deal with customer behavior, verbal de-escalation, safety and security in today's libraries. That's one that I've named and kind of dubbed and trained at PLA and MLA. And then we've done different report writing techniques and training, because anything that is written in a report is subject to legal request. So anything we write can be taken out and used in a court of law. So I really pushed that home and said, hey, let's get this documentation set in place to where we are providing strictly factual information, right? Because the best TV show ever made, Dragnet, tells you just the facts, right? Okay, so you guys aren't sleeping yet. And so what we're trying to do is move forward and continue to grow our department and continue to offer more resources to the community and to the staff. We're looking to add CPR and AED training, because one of the initiatives that I took when I got here was to get an AED in every one of our buildings. Well, now we need the certifications and the training. We're working at branches to get a better understanding. We actually sit in the branches at the circulation desk, learn workflows, and help fill in gaps so that we can understand what they're dealing with on a daily basis and see what is happening. Sometimes when we have a little downtime, I like to go to the dock and throw books, talk to those guys, see what they're dealing with. It's just a little bit different every day when we have so many different facets of this organization. And I told you, we provide guidance in an emergency situation. Hey, this is what's going on. You know, we found a bag of something that we don't know what it is. We think it may be drugs. Can that happen at the library? I'll tell you, yes, it can. So we field those phone calls, and Christy and I will actually go out with the training, because we're both prior law enforcement, and recover those items so that our staff aren't exposed to that, because we have been trained to recover those dangerous items. And then one of the last things we do is we identify trends. And we're going to talk about how we do that here in just a minute, but we identify trends and we figure out solutions to help those trends and what we're seeing in our branches every day. Cody, next slide, please. So here's some programs that have been added, an AED in every branch, like I told you. We were able to implement a new report writing system that allows us to track data and analytics and shows us trends. So I can say every day at 2 o'clock at North Independence, I have a group of individuals that comes in and causes this issue. What do I need to do to make that issue less of a problem? Is there a program that we can have during that time? Can I come out there and engage with these individuals and provide them with the resources necessary? We have development and implementation of new training. We go out during staff trainings, during staff meetings, involved in the community and involved heavily with the staff. And one of the other things that's not in there, I created this emergency preparedness manual that you see in front of you. What it is a breakdown of our emergency and security procedures with tabs that can flip you straight to what you need. And it's bullet point information that you can easily access in a quick fashion for an emergency event. Because if there's a fire, you don't need to read a 25-page procedure. You should probably flip to the little thing and say, oh, get out. Cody, next slide. Obviously, I'm just kind of cliff noting what you should do in the event of a fire, but some of the future growth that we're looking to do is expanding online training resources. We have an online training platform here at Mid-Continent, and I want to provide that information that's easily accessible to the 800 plus employees that we have at this organization. Because as you can imagine, trying to physically be in front of each one of those employees can be a difficult task. So trying to find a way to make that a lot more conducive is a way that we're trying to push towards the future. We're expanding community resources, working with local organizations with mental health awareness. The 988 is a new thing that has come into play. So it's something we're trying to help provide training for our staff and an understanding of. And then we're continuing to develop state-of-the-art security systems. You guys know about the cultural node at the Whitney Auditorium. You probably don't know about the state-of-the-art technology that we're using to secure that area. So if you want more information about that, pull me aside after the meeting and let me know. I'll be more than happy to talk to you about it. It's really, really cool stuff. Next slide, please. So this is the last slide, okay? But this will give you some idea of what we actually do. These are the metrics from the calendar year of 2022. Calendar year, that's important to remember, not this one. We had 1,218 total reports or activities reported. 1,041 were considered incidents, which would be consideration of an acceptable use policy, the conduct policy within our facility, medical emergency, so on and so forth. Non-incidents are potential problems like Dustin came into the library today and was just acting very strangely, said some weird things about Harry Potter and magic, and then left. So it's maybe a behavioral issue that seemed unordinary, or excuse me,
Out of the ordinary.
That's the word, out of the ordinary, that we may want to keep an eye on to see if it continues to become a trend. And then you can see that we had 82 911 calls. The majority of those were for medical emergencies. Customer fell, someone passed out, but we did have them for active assaults and things of that nature that take place within our facilities. Recovered property is something that we added in. There was really no structure around lost and found, or recovered property, as I like to call it. So when we created the report writing system, we actually made a database for that as well. We drafted a policy that we keep items for 30 days. After 30 days, those items then trigger a response to who's responsible for them, and they get removed from our system. They're pushed off. They're either electronic devices are destroyed and recycled through our electronics recycling through the IT department. Clothes would be donated to a local shelter if necessary. And, confidential items such as like someone's social security card, that's all mailed back to the Social Security Administration and things like that. So we had 1,400 items come in. Over 100 of those items were able to be tracked and returned to their owners. 792 were removed and destroyed. And there's currently 145 hanging out in our holding area for the 30 days, which will come up in 13 days. And so the average response time from the creation of an incident until it was physically cleared by either Christy or myself is 2.9 days. So that is how long on average courts stay open for us to come through and say, okay, we needed video pulled, we got that done. We needed this done, so we did that. A customer needed banned because this is their third conduct violation. And so we've got that done and they've been served and we close that out. 2.9 days is not the best number to me. That's a little bit of a, I would rather that be 0.9 days or even 1.9 days. And so that's why it's very important as Christy and I build this department with the 3 individuals that are coming in, that number will reduce. But you can see that is why we're continuing to grow our department. And that is what we're dealing with every single day. So with that, it was a little less than 2 hours. Do you have any questions for me? Yes.
Can you give a brief description of the status of our key cards?
You be a little more specific.
Our badge systems, the our antiquated software that.
Oh, okay, okay.
Because I think we're here, we're talking about this, and I think we need to sort of understand it's in front of us, but it would be good for the full board to hear that.
So currently we are using, forgive me for the acronyms, it is called a DMP system, which is, you know, your standard HID software, HID cards. They're a prox card. So when it's approximately in the area, it will trigger it, it will unlock. In order to manage that, we're using Entree, which was created by DMP many, many, many moons ago. And as technology goes, it's very antiquated and it doesn't fit the needs of our organization. So currently I'm working with different companies in the area. We currently use a Vigilon for our cameras, which is a very large company, very known in the security industry. And they also have an access control management platform that will allow us to integrate the access control management with the cameras and tie the two together in lovely matrimony and use that to the full benefit of both of the programs. Well, there are 2 different companies here in Kansas City locally that sell that. And I'm working with them, and I just did a project demo last week and actually saw the platform, the user interface, and how it works. The trick that we're going to run into is that with 38 facilities, and Jake, do you remember how many doors? It was like
over 4,000.
There's a few doors to try and incorporate all of that back into our organization. We're not going to be able to do everything all at one time. We're going to have to try and divide this out by sections. Some of the hardware can be reused. Some of the hardware is not going to be able to be reused just because of the dates on it. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're in the very early stages of trying to understand it. Any other questions?
Yeah, question.
Yes, Ron.
I had one. The topics you mentioned seem to be involving persons. Do you also have the responsibility for example, in 3 months, we're going to have tornado season coming up?
Yes.
Safety procedures like that for the weather and so forth related.
Yes. Yeah. So that's also included in here in the emergency preparedness manual. And it's outlined in a policy in the emergency response policies that Cody and I review every year to make sure that we're staying up on current standards. One thing we're trying to implement as well are tornado drills that kind of correlate with the weekly testing of the tornado sirens in the area. And with the additional people in our department, we're going to be able to focus in on that and actually do it more frequently. So yes,
right.
Yep, we do that as well.
Any questions?
Anything else? Well, thank you all for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks.
If you want to know about that stuff, just let me know. All right.
Great presentation. New business.
We have a handful of announcements.
He's in new business.
Oh, new business.
Then announcements.
Then announced. Well, there isn't any new business, only old. Yes. Now announcements. Okay, just to notify the board and everyone that we have ALA Midwinter coming up on February 27th. More importantly, we have Library Advocacy Day in Jackson City on February 7th. And one library closure on February 20th and on our President's Day. That.
If anyone would like to go to Library Advocacy Day with us in Jefferson City, please let Teresa know and we'll make sure that you get registered.
Oh, just noting that the technology committee is listed on February 20th. Do we want to move that?
That'll be moved. That'll be in conjunction.
That holiday.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, President's Day.
To trustees' comments, I had just a few, but would anybody like to lead off? Anybody?
Hey, this is Noelle. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to say I had the opportunity and pleasure to spend some time at the new Green Hills Library. Aside from the fact that it's absolutely gorgeous, and I just wanted to move in and just sit there for the next 48 hours or forever. Everybody there was absolutely wonderful. I just kudos to all of the librarians and the people that are working there, because they answered questions and they were kind and they were busy, and I just really appreciated them. And I just love that even though we're all a little frustrated with the money, I love that our libraries are so wonderful, because I know that all of the communities are just so blessed by them. And so the hard work on the back end pays off for the good stuff on the front end. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other trustees' comments? I had a few which are only the sort of thing I think that one would start off. If anybody was in uniformed service, they say, oh, don't volunteer for anything. But I am not asking for volunteers, but asking if there are any expressions of interest. Teresa, can you?
Cody, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. There are a couple of things I like, not to request any volunteers yet, but just something to kind of think about. The structure for establishing fees for the Culinary Center is vested exclusively in the trustees. So if we want to have anybody's interested in that, it'd probably be a bifurcated approach. One is to, first of all, determine the cost. Well, of course, it's going to require Xander to identify what items are going to be used for the, if you will, the proprietary side of it, as opposed to the purely educational library side. And we can find the function from Xander, the cost from Quan. And then once we get that, then the question is a policy for the board to determine how do we set fees. And I gave you an example a little bit ago. If you had someone like me come in and I want to use that as a way to enhance maybe a weekend hobby of mine, should I be charged the same thing as a young, dedicated, very driven young entrepreneur who needs a break? And I would suggest not at all. But again, that's the type of question I think we have to ask. For a number of months, well, John was with us, actually quite a few months, he commented about the strategic plan, whether or not we should have a new one or whatever. So the last strategic plan we had was in 2018. From what I could tell, it wasn't exactly fulfilled, in as much as the model for the plan was based on the imaging is very effective. It's almost like a Roman Greco structure that had these columns in front that were referred to as the pillars. And on the board up there was the facilities pillar. Well, we, of course, the building committee, and finance. Well, we have finance, fundraising, personnel, technology. One area in the strategic plan, which was not pursued, was the pillars corresponding to collections and communications. I'm just throwing that out as a consideration, if that's something that should be looked at or not. And of course, any decision ultimately made with great input from Aaron. And the last one is something that really I think is in desperate need of review, and that's the bylaws and the policy. For example, the bylaws and policies are silent as to what's going to happen in a couple of months, and that's the election of officers. No procedures for establishing a slate of candidates. And we can always establish ad hoc committees to handle that, but I thought it'd be more advantageous and much more prudent if we take a thorough, more comprehensive review of that. I think when we're going through the steps in the search, the provisions on the search that so wonderfully completed had holes in it, and where there weren't holes, there was some ambiguity. So big bunch of stuff. If anybody wants to look at that, give some thoughts about it, I'm not asking for volunteers. Just a moment, if you have a time that you're bored to death, want to do something, this may be something to think about. Last comment. If anybody watches Fox 4 in the morning, our library was amazingly well represented. There was the program on for the reading program. And I think the public media relationship that the library has, like Jim's department pretty much, is amazingly effective. And great job. Other trustee comments?
There was also a report on the genealogy center. The media that was
Oh, I'm
very-
sorry, but
The genealogy center also got some media coverage from Fox 4 the other day, which was very, very good.
yes, I remember. Yeah, you're extremely well done. Any other comments? Anybody? I know we'll have unanimous approval. We have a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
A second motion.
Third,
All in favor?
fifth.